Ever since the release of FNaF 4, theorists and fans alike have been scratching their heads on what was the actual story of FNaF 4, which is why today, in the spirit of October, we'll be going over 87 FNaF 4 facts and theories you should know. Make sure to keep an eye out for some guest creator appearances sprinkled throughout the video, as well as any facts you might not have known to mention in the comments. But first, let's get right into number 1. Development of FNaF 4 appears to have started around April of 2015, with the game's first teaser dropping at the end of that month. Number 2. Scott originally planned to release FNaF 4 on Halloween of 2015, but ended up finishing and releasing the game in July, aka a whole 3 months early. Number 3. As of the Nightmare Freddy teaser, Scott had nicknamed FNaF 4 the final chapter, half implying it might end up being the last game in the series. And while we know that didn't end up happening, FNaF 4 has been immortalized as the final chapter to a subsect of the FNaF story by 4 games, 1 story. Number 4. As of the Nightmare Freddy teaser, both Scott Games' website title and source code had been taken over by a ton of 8s and 7s, which was almost certainly a meta way of teasing more of FNaF 4 outside of just posting regular old teasers. Number 5. Unfortunately, fans at the time bizarrely took all those 8s and 7s, plugged them into GPS, and ended up locating a real-world pizzeria with no connection to FNaF whatsoever. After repeatedly harassing the pizzeria, Scott updated the site by removing a majority of the 87s and leaving a note in the footer about not calling any numbers fans thought might have been connected to the games. Number 6. Approximately a week after each new FNaF 4 teaser was posted on Scott Games, Scott would also post them on FNaF 4's IndieDB page with additional names for each file that weren't mentioned on Scott Games. Number 7. While the first 4 Nightmare teasers were all titled 4.jpg when posted on Scott Games, they were each individually titled nb.jpg and c.jpg and nf.1.jpg on IndieDB, with Nightmare Freddy simply being called teaser. Number 8. With the release of each new teaser came a color change for the Scott Games logo, with each new teaser's logo matching closest to these individual hex colors. If it wasn't obvious, the Fredbear hat teaser's color was just a darker version of the actual Nightmare Fredbear teaser color. Number 9. Early on during the release of these teasers, a theory came about specifically from 8-Bit Gaming that since Nightmare Bonnie was released 10 days after Freddy and Chica 9 days after Bonnie, the days between teasers would ultimately spell out 1987. However, I can't validate whether this actually happened by relying on old 8-Bit Gaming videos and Wayback Machine. Number 10. Each of the core 4 Nightmare teasers features a Nightmare overlay or the word Nightmare hidden somewhere within the image, while all subsequent teasers did not, establishing a distinct difference between the core 4 Nightmares and other characters like Nightmare Fredbear and Plushtrap. Number 11. Whether coincidentally or intentionally, the Nightmare Freddy teaser is almost an exact mirror of FNaF 2's Withered Freddy teaser.
Number 12. Although the other 3 Nightmare animatronic teasers featured the word Nightmare somewhere in the image, the Nightmare Foxy teaser said out of order instead.
Number 13. Apparently, Nightmare can still be found within Nightmare Foxy's upper row of teeth somehow, though I was never quite able to figure out how to actually find it. Number 14. Despite what happened with the source code, 87 still remained a very important aspect of FNaF 4, with 87 even appearing faintly within one of Nightmare Foxy's eyes. Number 15. Nightmare Foxy has a metal snake tongue in his teaser, however Scott ultimately removed it for stylistic, non-important reasons. Number 16. The 5th teaser featuring a purple hat and bow tie, while still named 4.jpg on Scott Games, was titled Something Big is Coming on IndieDB, which foreshadowed the eventual Nightmare Fredbear teaser. Number 17. Within the bottom right of the teaser was an obscure string of text, almost undeniably spelling out property of Fredbear's Family Diner, which held true for the hat and bow tie, which were the focus of the teaser. Number 18. Very faintly within the reflection on the floor can be seen the teeth, lower jaw, and bow tie of Nightmare Fredbear, showing up even before his own teaser had been revealed. Number 19. The Nightmare Fredbear teaser, or nfb.jpg on both Scott Games and IndieDB, interestingly does not feature the Nightmare overlay like the other Nightmares, implying there's something very different about Nightmare Fredbear from the other Nightmares. Number 20. All Nightmare teasers, minus Freddy's, featured a message with the basic question of, was it me? Teasing the idea that one of the Nightmares may have been responsible for something that we might see in the final game. Number 21. In this teaser, Nightmare Fredbear appeared to be grayscaled, while his bow tie and presumably hat remained colored, like how they first appeared in the last teaser, potentially alluding to Nightmare or hiding Nightmare Fredbear's true colors, though we all know even back then that whatever the 5th animatronic was going to be some form or another of the classic 5th Golden Freddy. Number 22. Although literal inspiration for the designs of the Nightmares appears to debatable. Nightmare Fredbear is almost guaranteed to be in the image of the actual Fredbear we see in FNaF 4, due to his hat and bow tie quite literally being property of Fredbear's family diner. But what might an implication like that mean for the reality of the actual Nightmare Fredbear character? Number 23. Similar to the last teaser, Nightmare Fredbear also features an obscured message within his stomach. This one appears a bit harder to crack, with it either spelling property of me or probably me, with the argument of which one's true not really mattering when both are technically true.
Fact 24. By looking just below Nightmare Fredbear's obscured message, some fans have pointed out what looks like a small crying face hidden within the costume. Since it is still debated whether this is a graphical error or not, this probably shouldn't be used as primary evidence to any theories and only as secondary evidence.
Number 25. The reason Scott didn't originally outright reveal the name of Nightmare Fredbear was because he instead revealed the name through a cryptic cipher hidden within the code of Nightmare Fredbear's teaser page. Within the code was this string, which, by subtracting each letter by 1 in the alphabet, first revealed the name of Fredbear. Number 26. Scott also did another cipher which wasn't associated with any one specific teaser. Hidden in the code of Scott games were these two strings, and adding 1 or subtracting 1 to find the string right in the middle of both of them would result in the year 1982. To date, 1982 has rarely, if at all, been mentioned directly in the series, but may have some sort of application to FNaF 4. Number 27. The final FNaF 4 teaser revealing Plushtrap also revealed Scott's decision to move FNaF 4 ahead from October to August 8th, with the image being titled 8815 or August 8th, 2015 on IndieDB. Number 28. Similar to Nightmare Fredbear, Plushtrap also noticeably lacks the hidden Nightmare overlay, and that coupled with his distinct appearance cements a very objective difference between Plushtrap and the rest of the Nightmares, even from Nightmare Fredbear, who's already on his own sort of an outlier from the others. Number 29. Scott yet again did a cipher for the Plushtrap teaser with these text strings noticeably out of place. The additionally hidden numbers of 13, 12, and 11 would be used to bring each group of letters forward by that many, revealing the name Plushtrap. Number 30. Something done exclusively with the Plushtrap teaser was Scott's choice to convert all of the source code 7s to 3s, changing what had been hidden 87s to 83s. Perhaps during late development of FNaF 4, Scott had decided to switch FNaF 4's time period from 1987 to a much earlier 1983.
Fact 31. While the FNaF 4 trailer doesn't have too much info that can't be found in the actual game itself, one of its 3 lines does seem to be pretty interesting. The line, "What have you brought home?" seems to imply whoever we play as somehow brought the Nightmare animatronics home. But is this the actual reality of our situation? Or is there perhaps something more going on?
Number 32. FNaF 4's title screen appears to be a shot of various Nightmare animatronics a fair distance away from a lone house sitting atop a hill in the middle of the forest. Although this may be a cool shot, it is interesting to note that this house on the hill in no way matches the one we actually visit during FNaF 4. Number 33. While the night sequences are very clearly set in what appears to be house settings, very little is known about our settings, like where these houses are or what year this all might be happening in, even whether both the Plushtrap hallway and Nightmare bedroom are set at the same location at all. Number 34. Regardless of what these areas actually are, they're almost certainly a part or derived from an Afton household, based on the same dressers, lamps, photo frames, and grandfather clock appearing in both minigame and night sequences. Number 35. During our nights, which last from 12 to 6, we normally fend off against Nightmare Freddy, Foxy, Bonnie, and Chica, whose pathing and mechanics are an exact mirror of their Core 4 counterparts. Was the pathing of the Nightmares based on their predecessors, or was it perhaps the other way around? Number 36. All Nightmare animatronics, aside from Plushtrap, possess a set of 5 fingers, which was a trait only possessed by earlier Springlock animatronics, establishing these characters to either exist or have existed very early on. Number 37. Within the night sequence rooms, we can also find a Freddy plush situated on the bed and a Foxy plush in our closet. Interestingly, this Foxy plush still seems to have its head, unlike the one we know the Crychild owns in the minigames. Number 38. You might be interested in knowing that both the Freddy and Foxy plushies disappear when their Nightmare counterpart is present within our room. However, this isn't often seen for the Freddy plush, since doing so would require getting jump scared. Is there perhaps some deeper correlation between the Nightmares and their plush counterparts? Number 39. If, like many other items in our nights, these plushies are the same ones found in the Afton household, then these night sequences would be taking place prior to the minigames, since Foxy's head has not yet been ripped off during our nights. Number 40. Our first 4 nights all work the same, with the only threats being the core 4 nightmares, while night 5 replaces everyone with Nightmare Fredbear. Number 41. Night 6 switches things up a bit by introducing Nightmare Fredbear at 4 AM after facing the normal 4 animatronics prior to then. Nights 7 and 8 work the exact same, except with Nightmare now replacing Nightmare Fredbear. Number 42. FNaF Plushtrap is playable before nights 2, 3, 4, and 5, but is not an option on nights 6, 7, and 8. Number 43. If we were to realistically portion out the 6 hours that make up each of our nights, the first 2 would logically go towards FNaF Plushtrap, while the middle 2 would be facing off against the core 4 nightmares, and the final 2 would be facing off against Nightmare Fredbear and Nightmare. Number 44. Unlike most games before it, FNaF 4 features 4 main stars as opposed to the usual 3, which are gained by completing nights 5, 6, 7, and 8. Number 45. One theory proposes that any night tied to unlocking a main star should be deemed canon, which would hypothetically make night 1 through 8 canon to FNaF 4 in one way or another. Number 46. Interestingly, FNaF 4 Night 8 is the only night throughout the entire FNaF series that cannot be replayed once completed. Make of that as you will, but I get the feeling that canonically, that means Night 8 only happens once.
Fact number 47. It's very clear that either whoever we play as in FNaF 4, or whatever might be causing these nightmares, knows about the characters featured in them, but that still leaves the question of who we play as, and why these things are even happening to us.
Number 48. Occasionally during our nights, one can spot an IV, bottle of pills, or vase of flowers by turning towards the bed, making it clear that these nightmares have something to do with a hospital or having seen one. Number 49. Although you wouldn't be able to tell during a normal night, speeding up some night audio reveals a FNaF 1 phone call hidden in the background of each night, implying that whatever these nightmares are have to be happening at least after FNaF 1 in 1993. Number 50. If it wasn't already clear because of the teasers, Nightmare Fredbear is a pretty interesting outlier amongst the other nightmares in both appearance and abilities. Fredbear having a stomach mouth is something that doesn't match any known Fredbear and strays a lot farther from inspired design than any of the nightmares dare to do in their own designs. Number 51. Nightmare is of course a shadowy version of Nightmare Fredbear, but he also serves to connect Nightmare Fredbear to Golden Freddy if that wasn't already apparent, with his colors being an obvious invert of Golden Freddy.
Number 52. In the files of FNaF 4, Nightmare is referred to as Shadow Freddy, which could help solve the identity of Nightmare, but would still leave us wondering why Shadow Freddy would look like this and why he might be within someone else's nightmares.
Number 53. The FNaF 4 minigames are 7 days total, spread from 5 to 0 days until the eventual birthday of the crying child at Fredbear's Family Diner, where one minigame takes place afterwards. Number 54. While not stated in FNaF 4, it's an objective and important fact that the crying child is an Afton, specifically the youngest son of the Afton family. However, his importance beyond the boundaries of FNaF 4 are still debated. Number 55. The crying child has a collection of the core 4 Freddy's characters as plushies in his room, which he considers his friends, though unfortunately Foxy seems to have lost his head by now. Number 56. This collection of plushies being the crying child's friends gets reiterated with them being present during the crying child's death. Although who he's referring to as his friends is still up to interpretation, I like to think he's just talking about the characters themselves. Number 57. Throughout the minigames, the crying child is constantly bullied by his older brother who wears a Foxy mask to scare him. Although there doesn't have to be a reason, it may be important to determine whether there's a specific reason behind why the older brother might bully the crying child. Number 58. Throughout the minigames, the crying child is constantly followed around by a Fredbear plush who oversees basically all his actions and movements. While the Fredbear plush constantly guides the crying child, technically he never actually says anything back to the Fredbear plush. Number 59. The crying child's crippling fear and hate of Fredbear's Family Diner appears to have spawned from something he witnessed, which may have left him traumatized. However, what he saw is not mentioned during the actual game. Number 60. After having his head accidentally crushed by Fredbear at his birthday, the crying child ultimately flatlines in the hospital where his brother apologizes, though according to the Fredbear plush, something about this death has now left him broken. Number 61. With the crying child broken, the Fredbear plush promises to put him back together. However, this appears to be a promise fulfilled later, since the crying child is left to cry in a black void as the Fredbear plush fades away. Number 62. The Fredbear plush is present in almost every frame of the neighborhood an Afton household, and even though it is shown to speak within Fredbear's, it's never actually shown to be present within the building. Number 63. While the crying child is locked within the parts and service room of Fredbear's, the Fredbear plush is noticeably absent and in fact doesn't even conclude the minigame with "tomorrow is another day" like usual. Number 64. The Fredbear plush is not only fully aware of whatever the crying child saw, but also constantly reminds him of this while inside Fredbear's family diner. This plush seems to be reminding the crying child as a cautionary warning, but this only appears to be worsening the crying child's fears. Number 65. Bizarrely, the Fredbear plush's standalone head appears on a flower. Not once, but twice. This raises a heck of a lot of questions that I'd really rather not get into right now. Number 66. Regardless of whatever the Fredbear plush actually is, whoever is behind it must have a very close connection to the crying child, at least close enough to constantly monitor him and know whatever he might have seen or be afraid of. Number 67. While the Fredbear plush's text color is a consistent orangish yellow through every minigame prior to the bite, its text color changes to a pale yellow during the final flatline minigame, implying that whoever was present during this minigame was not the same someone who had been monitoring us through the rest of them. Number 68. The Fredbear plush, or at least the pale yellow speaker who appears as the Fredbear plush during the flatline minigame, considers itself one of the crying child's friends, along with the other plushies. Perhaps this speaker also has some strong connections to the crying child, like the speaker before them.
Number 69. The crying child is constantly tormented by his older brother, who is almost certainly Michael Afton. Although Michael is ultimately responsible for killing his brother, he shows remorse and apologizes while on the deathbed of the crying child. Analyzing Michael's path of redeeming himself may be important to many other corners of the series.
Number 70. Fredbear's family diner is located within walking distance of the Afton household, which makes sense based on William's stake in the company, though this still raises the question of what the Hilltop house might have been if not one within close proximity of Fredbear's. Number 71. Within the Afton house is a girl's room. However, no apparent Afton sister can be found in the house or even present in the game. Considering that it wouldn't have been too hard to program another character into this room, was this meant to show us that they were intentionally missing?
Fact number 72. Within the girl's room is a mangled Funtime Foxy left in pieces on the floor. While it's never stated if this is just a toy or an actual animatronic, it could have been a teaser for Sister Location, where we learn more about the actual Afton sister.
Number 73. On our walk home from Fredbear's family diner, we can encounter a kid who shows us their plush Spring Bonnie finger trap toy. This toy provides more merit to the idea that of the nightmares, at least Plushtrap is a real toy and there's no weird distortion or illusion going on with him. Number 74. Throughout the minigames, we run into a lot of characters with a lot of different text colors. However, the Plushtrap kid and Freddy Bully both share the same text color. Could this be intentionally pointing to the idea that these two are siblings, which is something we naturally knew of the Aftons, but wouldn't have known of these other two otherwise? Number 75. On our walk home from Fredbear's, we run into a red pigtailed girl who tells us rumors of animatronics coming to life at night and hiding your body away. Considering the history of Fazbear Entertainment, was there perhaps a real instant, event, or murder that may have sparked rumors such as these? Number 76. Interestingly, this red pigtail girl also shares her text color with the Fredbear plush during the flatline minigame. Using the logic from these other two, would that mean the Fredbear plush and red pigtail girl are siblings, or is there something stranger going on here? Number 77. On our walk home, we can run into a girl playing with her little toy figures of Freddy, Bonnie, and Chica. Interestingly, this girl resembles Susie's appearance in Fruity Maze quite a bit. Could Susie have gone to Fredbear's and known the crying child years before she was actually killed? Number 78. Within the Afton house, we can turn on a TV which shows us a cartoon called Fredbear and Friends 1983. While this may have been a good indicator to the year of FNaF 4, some fans originally thought this was actually a rerun of the show. Number 79. Fredbear and Friends 1983 shows Fredbear along with the other core 4 Freddy Fazbear gang. Interestingly, Spring Bonnie is noticeably absent from this cartoon despite featuring Fredbear. Number 80. Appearances of Fredbear with an inconsistent number of buttons and Foxy's occasionally flocked legs seem to indicate that every character has a design used for branding which may not always reflect the design of the actual animatronic. Number 81. Throughout FNaF 4, multiple things the crying child sees during his week before the party serve not as a callback but a call forward to things further ahead on the timeline, such as Springtrap, Mangle, and the Shadows. Number 82. The best example of this is the tiny toy Chica missing her beak being being a call forward to Toy Chica losing her beak in FNaF 2, which was something hinted to be important by Scott during a game theory lore stream. Determining the relationship between what the crying child experienced and what happens later along on the timeline may be vital to pinpointing his impact on the series as a whole.
Number 83. In another hint by Scott to help theorists along, it was stated that what is seen in the shadows is misunderstood in the mind of a child. Perhaps whatever the crying child saw to make him afraid of Fredbear's wasn't quite the reality of what he perceived it to be.
Number 84. Following the release of Sister Location, Scott states that he used the game to clear up a misconception from FNaF 4, however did not elaborate on what that misconception was or what in Sister Location might have fixed it. Odds are it was just clearing up the 83 versus 87 debate with the 1983 code in Sister Location's private room. Number 85. Sister Location's private room seems to have done a bit more than just solving the 83 dispute by showing us not only cameras of the nightmare rooms, but also the Fredbear plush holding a walkie-talkie camera remote. With the private room also shown off in Sister Location's fake ending, perhaps it had a much greater purpose than just as an alternate ending to the game. Number 86. After the release of FNaF 4, Scott stated that one reason the story of FNaF 4 may have remained hidden from fans and theorists is because they assumed he had filled FNaF 4 with random Easter eggs. Apparently, FNaF 4 is not just filled with random Easter eggs, suggesting that almost everything we see in the game holds some form of importance and shouldn't be written off as some random reference. And finally, number 87. After the release of FNaF 4, Scott stated that unlike past games, FNaF 4 was not entirely picked apart and solved all at once, which was obvious with how much of the game is still debated about to this day. Perhaps breaking down facts like these from and about the game will help us get a bit closer, if not a bit late, to the truth. And with that, I'd like to thank everyone who helped in the production of this video and each of these amazing creators who jumped in to do one of the facts. Thank you for watching, and if you'd like an 87 Halloween FNaF Facts, then make sure to like and subscribe, and again, thank you for watching.